So I'm Margaret Hart-Frondorf, and I'm the Alumni Director at SAIS, and I'm here with Ron Shelp, class of 1966. And we're going to talk a little bit about SAIS, and we're going to talk about your days at SAIS. And Ron, reflect back. When you were thinking about graduate school, what went into that mode of thinking, and how did you end up at SAIS?
Well, it wasn't a very profound mode of thinking. I actually was planning to go to law school, but I was a college debater, and we were debating at Johns Hopkins, and doing pretty well, I should add, and I saw a sign that talked about SAIS. So I thought, this is very interesting, and I applied. Very simple. I didn't apply other places. I applied to SAIS, and fortunately I got admitted.
So when you got here, you had to make a couple of decisions about what your area of studies would be. What did you decide?
Well, my language was Spanish, and then, and I suspect now, everybody had to take international economics, and beyond that it seemed to be a mishmash. I mean, we had a course we all had to take called Wide World, which I think was actually called the United States in a Changing World Environment. I don't believe that exists anymore.
So, any comments about professors that you may have had? Any remembrances from your day of taking courses?
Well, I thought most of the professors were great. I don't remember the names anymore. It's been a long time. But I enjoyed them. It was all very stimulating to me. It was a very different atmosphere for me. You know, I came from a very small town in Georgia, and then went to the University of Georgia. And I remember being quite intimidated when I got here, and people announced themselves, and one of the first people I met was, he said, "I went to Harvard College. Where did you go?" So I got over my intimidation, but it was all just a wide opening world. I learned a lot.
So after you graduated and you began to launch your career, how did the SAIS degree help you?
Well, the SAIS degree helped a lot, but what really helped was the dean. I don't remember who was the dean then.
Wilcox?
Yeah, probably Wilcox. There was a special job opening at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce where a trade association had asked them to manage it. So they called SAIS, and Dean Wilcox recommended me because one of the requirements was Spanish. I said no. They called a second time, and I said no. And the reason was I decided I wasn't going to work for a right-wing organization, and I decided the U.S. Chamber of Commerce was a right-wing organization. The third time they called, he said, you know, you could at least go interview them. Well, I'm glad I did, because while I still think a lot of them is a right-wing organization, the international department, which is where I was, supported free trade, foreign aid, and all those things. So I got a great job at the age of 25 as head of the Association of U.S. Insurance Companies Operating Abroad. So that's how it started. And 2 years later, they said, we want you to keep doing this, and we're going to give you an assistant. But we also want you to run another association we've been asked to manage, and this was called the Association of American Chambers of Commerce in Latin America. So, tough job. Each year, I had to visit every Latin American country twice, which was, you know, good for my Spanish, and I had a wonderful time.
Sounds wonderful. So, you've done a lot in your career, and it expands even further beyond the associations that you were just describing. Talk about your proudest moment in your professional life.
My proudest moment. I probably enjoyed being president of the New York City Partnership more than anything else. That's an organization that had been founded by David Rockefeller. In fact, he was my first chairman. It's an organization of about 120 CEOs, mainly business, but some nonprofit leaders and so forth. Their mandate is twofold. One, to improve New York, and they did some good things, and secondly, to lobby for business. With this job, and a second job, I was also president and CEO of the New York Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So we sort of divided this up. I had an executive vice president under each. He would go testify before the state legislature or Congress or whatever as the executive vice president of the New York Chamber. And I would always be the good guy, the president of the New York City Partnership. So he's pushing for tax cuts, and I'm pushing for ways to provide improved housing. So it was sort of a nice division, maybe a little misleading, but we did both, and it was fun. I mean, I did this for 7 years. I got to know every CEO in New York. The job had its perks. Every year, Lincoln gave the president of the 5 biggest chambers a brand new Lincoln Town Car, not to own, but chauffeur came with it, and they drove me around to all my meetings. And then I took the car on weekends and went to an upstate home. So there was a certain amount of that. There's a lot of media exposure, and I got pretty good at it, a lot of TV shows and so forth. But I think we also did a good job. I think we improved New York. I can remember one meeting we had with Governor Mario Cuomo, and we were pushing for something that business really wanted. And he said, I would be totally opposed to that, but you guys have done so much for New York that's positive, I'm going to support it. So that was very gratifying.
So talk about one of your prouder moments, unrelated to the professional life, but really more delving into just your personal time and the hobbies, and what's sort of your greater achievement in that realm?
Well, I have a passion about art. And in this job where I had to visit all the countries in Latin America, but in jobs I had with AIG and others, I traveled all over the world. I always bought art. But then in 1986, I was on the board of the American Folk Art Museum, and they wanted 10 directors to go to the South. I frankly wasn't the least interested, but I said, well, we can get off and go visit my family. So my wife and I went. Sure enough, we did get off the truck or the bus that was driving us down once we got down there. We got off at the Pancake House in Carswell, Georgia. But on the course of this trip, I discovered these artists, all Southern, all self-taught, vernacular artists, no education, no training, and it became a passion. I went down about once a month. There was a man down there, a wild, passionate, half-crazy genius, who organized it all. He picked out 25 artists, supported them on $2,000 each a month, and then he would visit them, and he had the right to take any one piece. Well, that was fun. I got to know these people, but I liked them. Many of them would come to New York and stay in my apartment, but I thought I was actually helping them. They got exposure they would have never gotten. And then one, especially, hit the big time. He died in January. His name was Thornton Dial. He had his retrospective of his work in Indianapolis in 2011. The Wall Street Journal, for one, said of the 10 great art shows last year in the world, this was one of them. So it just went on and on. He suddenly got a great dealer. He's going to be at Art Basel. It's just been an incredible experience. And, frankly, monetarily, I own 40 of the dials. And I never bought them until the last year for money. I always bought them because I liked them, and I could buy them through this man Arnett. He sort of controlled all this. The last year, I could see it coming, so I did go down. I bought what I liked. Arnett's prices had gone up, but nothing like they're going to be now. So I bought what I liked, and I bought it also as an investment. I bought 5 pieces in 2015, and then he died in January of 2016. The man was 87. He had had 2 strokes, and he was still making art. I mean, they would lay the piece of work or the canvas or whatever he was doing on the table. His sons would be around him, and one of them is a great artist too, and he would point, move this here, no, do this, do this, do this, and do this. And some of his best art was made under those circumstances. Wow. And yet he had been discovered when he was 60 years old. He was illiterate. I mean, it's an incredible story. But I've now discovered there's an obituary The obituary in the New York Times was a half page. They mentioned it on the front page. There was an obituary in the Washington Post. There was a write-up in Time magazine. It turns out there's like 40 of these obituaries around the country, and we're trying to assemble them now. So it was strictly very self-rewarding, but ironically, it also probably ended up monetarily rewarding, although I've given away a lot already before this happened, without me ever realizing it. So the art's been probably the most gratifying so-called extracurricular activity of my life. I used to make a joke when I was traveling for the chamber before I started collecting this kind of art. I would say, you know, my work is interfering with my art collecting. So I'd go to Brazil and I'd want to go look for art, but I had to do this work. So it's been wonderfully gratifying. I loved it.
That's a great story. So students will be possibly watching this video, and I can't conclude this without asking you, what advice would you give young SAIS students today as they're entering school and their graduate studies and thinking about their future? Do you have some advice for them?
Well, I'll try. I think it's much tougher today. I mean, you know, look at the way I got my first job. I turned it down 3 times. I think it's tougher for the best educated student, and one from SAIS would be, to find work, frankly. That's why I'm making a film documentary that deals with some of this. I guess I would look hard, look many places, recognize that while you may have something you want to do, you may not be able to do it at first, but you can work into it. And also to understand that it's so much serendipity. Just like my art collecting and suddenly by accident getting into the Southern African American self-taught art was totally serendipity. I mean, my job at the chamber was totally serendipity. I turned it down. You just have to sort of know what you want to do, recognize your passions and interests will change. I can remember when I got out of college, I decided I wanted to be a theologian, President of the United States, a writer, and there's something else I don't remember. Well, I've managed to be a writer. I've gotten into politics through being president of the New York City Partnership. And, you know, I didn't do everything I wanted to do, but obviously I've matured and changed. So I'm not giving very good advice. I just think you have to pursue it, recognize it's probably much tougher now than it was when I got out of SAIS, and keep after it and look for opportunities and see opportunities where you might think it's a liability and hope that some serendipity breaks your way.
Well, I think that's great advice, and it's a perfect way to conclude our talk this afternoon, our interview. And I did want to say it's April 13th, 2016, just to make note of this date and this time. And I thank you.
You're welcome. Enjoyed it. So that was shorter, right?